Hey, I'm Matthew Ma, the host of the Truth About Real Estate podcast, and today we are talking with Colin Tate of Host Coach. Colin harnesses his skills as a successful tech entrepreneur and super host of multiple properties to coach you to achieve your goals as an Airbnb host. His mission is to share his experience, knowledge of specific tools and software, and the system he has created to harness the unique opportunity of short-term rental investing so that others can enjoy a life of financial freedom to live their why. Excited to talk with you. Colin,
Yeah,
how's it
great.
going?
Yeah, Matt, doing really well. Happy to be here.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited. I really want to learn more about, real estate, short-term rentals, Airbnb, and how you came from a tech entrepreneur to really building this short-term rental investing opportunity across the country.
Yeah, like a lot of people in real estate, sort of happens by accident sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I've always been kind of excited about real estate, but I sold a company back in 2018, and as a serial entrepreneur, as you said, I was sort of scratching my head and trying to figure out what to do next, right? What's the next thing to build, the next problem to solve? But I did have one cabin that was performing really well on Airbnb, and the numbers were really strong. So I decided to take the leap, and that summer of 2018, made investment in three additional cabins, and that really kicked off the journey.
Let's talk about that too. Like in real estate, there's so many different ways to really invest into real estate. What made you decide to really build out your first short-term rental?
It was accidental and exciting. So I bought this first cabin
Mhm.
really as just a getaway. I think my son was about 5 years old, and anybody out there that's got kids in that age range knows you're looking for something to do, right? Something a little different. And so we bought that cabin, and it was just a family cabin. But then friends wanted to stay, and other friends wanted to stay. So on a whim, I just put it on Airbnb, and it just booked every weekend. I mean, just automatically just started booking, and that was really exciting. And so in 2018, when I was figuring out the next thing to do, I knew that the revenue potential was there. So I just dove in.
Isn't it kind of amazing too? Like, it's really fortunate that you were luckily able to do that and during that time period and just build it up. And the fact that you bought a home to vacation home to use for your family, which made it a little bit easier because you already knew the purpose of it. But by accident, people are asking you to really start utilizing it, and then now you're getting actually rental income coming in. You're seeing a platform like Airbnb actually bring you business, and you see the dollars coming in, pouring in, and the fact that you were able to book it out every single week. What did you think about that when that first happened?
I was honestly surprised. When my wife had originally suggested or asked if we were going to rent that cabin out, my response was, "Oh heck, what are we going? We're going to make a couple $100 a month. Is it even worth it?" But then when all of a sudden you turn it on and it's you know netting $2,000 a month, that's real money, and
Yeah.
over all your bills, and so that's enough to pay for itself and your primary house as well.
Let's talk about that process too. Okay, so for example, you decide. So when people start deciding, they start saying, "Okay, well, can I do long-term rental or and find long-term tenants, or should I get a short-term rental?" In your case, since it's a vacation home and you want to use it for your family, then the short-term rental applies. Where
Right.
you because if you do long-term, you can't use it, so it defeats the purpose. So when you started hopping on Airbnb, you set up your profile, you start learning about the platform and how to utilize it. How did you go about the next steps? Okay, I'm gonna rent this out. Furnishing it, you already pre-furnished it, but at the same time, okay, my insurance, I need to find cleaners, some maintenance people to do it, and it's going to turn over a lot faster. I need to set up key structures so I can open and close doors, email marketing. And how did you think about that? And like, what were the steps you had to take, and what did you learn from it?
It was when we went from one to three over the course of that summer. It makes you need to understand and develop a process, right? So um, I found that were a number of tools that are available. Airbnb and the other online booking platforms make their API available to third parties that help you in your operations. So, for example, there are dynamic pricing tools that set your pricing for you based on the demand, a specific demand for upcoming weekend. That was a really huge tool, and we could talk about that further. And the other really big tool that I had to come to grips and find a solution for was communicating. When you're communicating with not just one guest a weekend or one guest at a time, when you're communicating with, three guests at a time, 12 turnovers per month, that's 36 different people you're communicating with. That becomes a burden. And so there are tools. The one that I use is called Hospitable, which is an automated messaging platform for your guests.
So that's pretty cool. So, for example, yeah, the worry people have is like, well, I don't even want to be a landlord and deal with one tenant. Now you're telling me to deal with 36 tenants, and they're coming in and out every single weekend. I'm busy. I have a job. I have kids. How do I do this?
Exactly. So that auto messaging platform works. So when somebody books, they'll get a message that I've customized that's confirms all their details. But the first message tells them everything that they would want to know about planning a trip to this area, right? So where to stop for donuts along the way, where the best restaurant is, where the grocery stores are. Here's some things to do. You might want to go hiking. You might want to go biking. You might activities. So all of those questions that you think you're going to get asked one off, we address in an automated message.
That's actually perfect, smart, and I love that because being both of us coming from tech background, it's all about streamlining processes,
Mhm.
automation, and the point of it is really communication and creating transparency and making it so
Yeah,
easy and user friendly that anyone can follow. And then by doing that, they fall in love with it because you kind of make it like Amazon, a one-click system where I know exactly what I need. Is everything's done. It takes the first time takes a little bit because you're learning what your clients are asking, what their questions. But when you start building out these messaging tools with information and to answer everything like who, what, where, when, why, how, and you address all of them and you make it nice, it makes it so much easier and the customer experience is a lot better. And as you built it, now the next person is going to utilize the same concept and you just improve it over time, right?
exactly. It's sort of like a FAQ doc, right?
Yeah.
And then there are the one-off questions that you get asked. Do something specific. Do you have a crib? For example, or so you those little questions come through on Airbnb has a nice app, and you just like I call it a bathroom business sometimes, right? So it's just a
Yeah.
quick like 60 seconds while you're standing in line at the grocery store answering a question for a guest.
And I think one good thing about that too is it's actually great when guests ask you questions because you can actually think about that. Like, hey, I could have a crib here. I could have this here. I could add this, and that be additional value. It can be additional upsell. It can be additional, just point, right?
Right. I always tell people to review their reviews, right? So when guests, if we ask people, how can we improve? And you're right. You're sort of crowdsourcing your maintenance schedule and your amenity upgrades. Somebody says, hey, do you have a blender? Then you can go on Amazon and buy a blender.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because now you can see that. Then when I think about that, the next step for me would be okay. Well, let's say I bought a blender. How do I even if I don't even live there? How do I
Hmm.
ship this thing to that
Yeah.
location? Who opens it, unpackages it, gets it all ready, sets it all up, adds,
And that touches on a part of your question there before about the processes. In addition to these tech tools, we need relationships. So my properties are all about 2.5 hours from my home. So no, I'm not going to run that blender down there. I have real strong relationships with the most important person being your housekeeper. So you need to find somebody who is doing more than just pushing a vacuum cleaner around, right? You need a trusted business partner who is that housekeeper who is vested in the success of the property and really takes pride in cleaning and inspecting and letting you know when items are wearing, towels are wearing, sheets are wearing. And then I literally go on Amazon and ship those cleaning supplies with that blender that we keep talking about directly to my housekeeper, and she puts it in the property for us because she's there every 2.5 days.
and that's a great thing too, finding people, and that's a really important point too. How do you find these right people, and how do you vet them to make
Mhm.
sure that they're doing what they say they can do?
Yeah. I the generic way is to use, you know, uh, like the job search sites. You can find people for cleaning. I have a trick that I use, which is I print one of those bandit signs, like a yard sign, real nice one, and it says housekeeper, and I have a Google phone number on it, and I put that out in the entrance of the neighborhood. And since I'm in an area that has other rentals, there's housekeepers driving, around that area all the time. So if I have a new property, I just put that sign up and usually get a dozen calls or so. And then for vetting, just like any other type of interview, you sit down with people and you figure out who has the credentials and who you feel like you can trust and work with.
Yeah. And then, so for example, when you're doing this, you're building it out. So first property, most people will probably buy something close enough to home so that they can do it and manage it, or fly down there if they
Right.
need to, and put a bandit sign and try to hire. If you were to do this all remotely and never really be there, it gets a little harder, right?
It does, and when I coach people, I'll often get asked that question, what's the best market?
Mhm.
Is Miami, Florida the hottest market? I tell people, short-term rentals is about revenue, but it's also about enjoying what you do, right? It's about financial freedom. And so I tell people to find their where, right? Find a place that you wouldn't mind spending some time. Where would you like to go with your spouse or your friends for a weekend? If you have a 3-day weekend, where do people in the Bay Area go to get away? Is it a wine country? So particularly for that first investment, I really try to encourage people to find a place that's within a couple hours driving distance of their home base, so that they can master their craft and learn how to set a place up and how to operate it.
Exactly, and I think that makes a good point too. Yeah, especially your first one, like even first real estate investment, usually people buy something local, close to home, and everything like that. And especially even vacation rental, if you can buy something you can utilize yourself too, out of the year, maybe using it up to 10 days, for example,
Right.
and then you're investing in that. You're learning the process. You know the location because you've driven there. You know the amenities nearby, like best, like you mentioned earlier, best places to eat, best places to shop, hike, whatever it may be,
Exactly.
and to enjoy it because you're localized. You understand the market in a sense, right? But if it's somewhere else in another state across the country, you might not know any part of it. You could research all of it, but it doesn't mean it's good. You can build
Right.
off of it, and but that's also additional work on top of it, right? Additional stress in the beginning for your first one.
Exactly. You know, Several years after having my systems and properties set up, I did have the freedom. I moved overseas. With my wife and my son, we moved to Athens, Greece for a year
Nice.
and managed 7 properties that we had at the time. On a 7-hour time difference, 10,000 miles away. But that was with those processes already in place.
And I would say this too. In the beginning, your first property, you do everything yourself as the first time because you're learning the processes. You're learning how to go through everything. You're investing your time into your investment property, right? After a while, you can actually start hiring assistants, VAs, managers to build it out as you scale your business, right?
Yes. Yes.
So for example, when you started building your first one and you started seeing the revenue coming in, you're building it up, it's actually paying for this property, paying maybe even your property you live in. At what point did you really decide to, "Hey, this is actually a real business that's actually growing. I can actually buy another one."
As I said, that summer of 2018, I ended up buying 3 properties, and
Mhm.
I bought one from a wholesaler that ended up needing about 6 months worth of rehab. And then I bought one from the MLS. And the one that I bought from the MLS, that owner had a second property. So I bought her second property from her off market. So I kind of did a wholesale, an MLS, and an off market deal kind of all at the same time.
Nice.
But as soon as those started, to go online, then you can really start to experiment between them and add an amenity here, change a policy here, increase a price over here. And that's when I really got good at the craft. That's when I really started to understand what makes the algorithm work, how to get a property at the top of listings, and what that means for what you can do in terms of controlling price and raising prices.
And when you think about this too, you bought those three homes. You mentioned, one from a wholesaler, one from rehab, and one off market from the rehab one. But how did you start like really sourcing these deals? Like you mentioned wholesaler, but like did you start finding them where they saw your Airbnb and they asked you about it?
Real estate tends to pick up momentum. When people are getting started, you're usually thinking about the million questions you don't have,
Hmm.
answered. But once be it a fix or flip or multifamily, once you get going and a little momentum going, I feel like the deals start to find you. So this wholesaler actually had called me wanting to buy a property from me, but I recognized him as a wholesaler. And so I reached out and said, "Hey, I'm not looking to sell, but if you do come across anything, I'm an investor. If you come across things of this criteria, let me know." So, that is a way that, your audience can start as well as, reach out to real estate agents, reach out to wholesalers, and, tell them what you're looking for. The more you talk about what you're looking for in real estate, I feel like the more the universe helps those things find you.
I agree. It helps you attract it. The more you put it out there into the world, the more people see it, and like it actually comes back to you. So like if you want to be successful at something, you can just put it out there, and you'll find it. So that's a
Mhm.
really good point about it too. And when you started doing this too, like the first one, the next question people will ask you too is like, how do you even get your loan on the first property? Like, how much are you putting down?
Sure.
And then how did you start buying all the furniture and everything like that?
Yeah. The first one is generally pretty easy because the bank is waiting for the typical homeowner to come in and say, "I'm ready to buy a vacation house," right?
Hmm.
Our banking system is set up for that. They understand that established, people are going to go buy that house at the river or at the lake or at the beach. So usually on a second home, vacation home, you can get a 90% loan, 10% down. When you start to go past, 2 and 3 and 4, then you start to look for loan products that understand that this is an investment.
Yeah, that's the point too. And I heard that too. Like when you start building these Airbnbs, the first one's definitely easier, but then as you get to second, third one, what happens too is your debt to income ratio starts changing, and they'll start asking you, "Hey, I want a 2-year history on your first property." If you're going to use that as additional leverage to get your second or third property by then.
You know, Different loan officers have different products.
Hmm.
So, that 2-year number you hear a lot. In my experience, I've found lots of products where, as long as it's shown on a year's tax returns, as long as you're able to document it on a tax return, that often is enough.
That works too. Yeah, if you can show the numbers on the 1 year, even if it was like 3 months, 6 months, and you show the percentages, the revenue and drive, some lenders would have options. So I guess the point being is like there's multiple loan products out there. You really got to understand it. Ask different lenders to see.
Mhm.
Not all lenders are the same at all. They all have different
Exactly.
products to understand
Exactly.
their guidelines to see what makes sense for you. And as long as the number is making you profitable, having good cash flow, and it makes financial risk and sense, then you can something to consider, right?
Yeah, and that's that leap I think that all of us in real estate go through, which is, you know, I'm a individual who has an investment property to becoming more of a real estate investor. And I think one of those hurdles then is finding that we all run into is where to find financing when you're making that jump from I own a property to I own multiple properties. But they're
Yeah.
out there. They're out there. And in short-term rentals, there's a company called Vizio that focuses on short-term rental investors and understands the cash flows and understands the business.
How do you spell that?
I think it's VISIO.
Visio, yeah.
Check that in in the
Reminds
show
me of the
notes.
tech program, that sounds similar to that. Okay. Okay, yeah, for example, now they're getting a loan, they're buying their first Airbnb. The next part of it too is like, okay, if I don't live there the first time, so I need to furnish this place. And like some people have creative design styles, some people don't have creative design styles, and furniture right now in 2022 is hard to come by sometimes because of the delays with
Right.
COVID going on.
We tend to buy a bunch of furniture, we start shipping it in. Luckily, we have a two-car garage in our house, and one half of that garage is usually full of some furnishings and furnitures. We're actually in that process right now. I'm heading out this afternoon just to work on a property that we closed on Monday. But we usually start filling up that garage with mattresses and beds and stuff that's coming in from Wayfair or Amazon. Um, and then I usually rent a U-Haul, and I put it all in a 20-foot U-Haul and take it down and drop it all in a weekend.
So that's another point too. Like you think about this too, and as an investor, that's I see that as more active investing, even though it becomes passive at a point. But in the beginning, is all active because now you're buying all this furniture, you're shopping online, you're buying it, ordering it, delivering it, installing it, or having paying someone to install it. But you're managing all this, and then you're managing the Airbnb side of things.
And most people enjoy that part. I know that I do, and for most of the people that I coach, it is the setup period, is active. And if you enjoy shopping, if you enjoy, you know, buying things, fixing things, installing things, it's rather pleasurable, and it's also not your house, so you can take risks, right? There's things that you can do, that you wouldn't do in your home because it's not your home. So it takes some of the pressure off of finding that perfect piece, that perfect piece of art or that perfect color match. I'm not saying that we cut corners. I'm just saying
Mhm.
that I know my wife, for example, has done most of the design work for her places, and she was always hesitant to make big, when it comes to decorating let's say we're renovating a bathroom, right? Picking out the perfect tile. Well, in a short-term rental, you can pick out a really good tile, and it doesn't, it's not a reflection of you personally.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. I see people pick different things, different price points, and it looks really nice. And even nowadays, I would say it's getting better and better where you can buy a lot of items from Amazon, from Wayfair, from other websites, and it really comes out really well if you could put it together. And once you do the first property, you can mimic it on different properties and
Yeah.
just change the style a little bit later
We
as you
definitely
as
have some
you go.
go-to items, right?
Yeah.
We buy the same towels, we buy the same sheets. We've bought a couple of bed frames. It works, and it's black, and we know where to get it. We know how to put it together. So again, you're creating some momentum there, um, through repetition.
So yeah, if you think about it from a tech perspective, you're actually systematizing even the buying process. It becomes a part of the system because you can actually quantify and adjust and lay everything out in spreadsheets or databases where
Hmm.
you have all your items, go to places, URLs, pricing points, condition, quality, and how long it lasts. And then knowing okay, looks nice, but actually is really cheap. It breaks every month. I have to forget that.
Right,
Let me go readjust it to something better quality that costs a little bit more but lasts a lot longer.
right.
So you see that, and it becomes part of the performance of the property, and instead of just being an item, it becomes part of the value of what you're trying to achieve in terms of creating that revenue stream.
Correct. Yeah, it
So
definitely becomes a process.
good. And how long would you say the active work is involved to set up your first Airbnb?
It depends on the shape of the property when you acquire it, right? So some places we have bought have been turnkey. Some of these places come with furniture or some furniture. So, we did one a couple years ago that was a log cabin, and a family lived in it full time. And so the place was immaculate. We really just needed to bring in some couches and TVs. Um, Now I've done other places where, for example, that story I told you about the wholesaler, where I built a 700-foot driveway and dug a 700-foot well, and basically did all flooring. So it can be a range, but usually we try to shoot to turn over in like 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. And also too, I guess when you start talking about that part of it, some properties when you buy, they're turnkey. That's easier, it's better, it's faster in a sense there. But the opportunity too that comes along with the renovation is that you might get a better price on that property. You could do the renovations to
Right.
your specs to turn it into a better Airbnb host property. And with that savings in mind, it takes time, but that saving is the same thing as you're doing a fix and flip. Same thing if you're
Right.
buying investment properties
It's
with
a lot like a
add
fix and
value.
flip. Yeah. My
So
wife says
exactly.
she likes them crispy, and I like them turnkey.
Yeah. I like to fix them up. But it's a lot of work though. Like I did some ground up properties here in the Bay Area, and it's a lot of work to get to the final stages. But when you see the changes
Mhm.
overall, it's fun. But then
It's
the
super
cost
rewarding, right?
is super rewarding. But the cost and time involved to do that, you built a lot of equity doing it, but you definitely had to do a lot of sweat equity to make that happen.
Right.
So
Nothing's
in
free, but you are definitely forcing appreciation that way.
Yeah, so if you do that with Airbnb, it kind of becomes a mix. Because if you do a fix and flip, you're paying taxes right off the bat, right? Short-term gain if you're selling it quickly.
Right.
But in an Airbnb, if you did a fix, flip, and hold because you're
Right.
holding it for Airbnb and you waited the 2-year period anyways, then you got the equity and you got the cash flow.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's
And the
another
cash flow is so
positive.
strong. I don't know. Gosh, of all the, I've coached probably over 100 people, and I don't know many people that are selling right now because the market is so hot, in terms of the rental revenues that, people are really holding and cash flowing.
Let's talk about that too. Because in real estate, there's so many different ways to do investing, and I hear a lot of people nowadays are talking and asking questions about Airbnb and short-term rentals. How do you see the numbers looking in comparison to like a single family's rental, long-term rentals, multi-units, and storage units?
5 to 10x gross. So if I try to take one of my, like a 2 or 3 bedroom, house cabin that I have that maybe you would gross, 1,800 or $2,000 a month in terms of a gross rent. You would be grossing something more like, $10,000 a month in the short-term rental market.
That's a lot of huge difference.
That is a huge difference. Now the cost side is different as well, right? So, on that $2,000 long-term rental, you're just paying your mortgage, property taxes, interest, um, where your tenant's most likely paying utilities and cleaning and upkeep, right? So on the short term, you're paying the utilities and housekeeping fees, the turnover fees, the housekeepers, that does tend to be, a significant number. So we usually look at something like about 50% to the bottom line, so a net number off of that gross after all expenses in short-term rental.
That's a good point too, because when you look at it from an investment standpoint, like wow, I can actually achieve that much more. If you're telling me a normal long term rental is 1,800 to 2,000, and now if I Airbnb, I can get 10,000 a month, and if I even discount the vacancy factor, I have to deal with utility, cleaning, upkeep, furniture, maintenance. That even then, that difference is so huge, over 50%, that it's like wow, this can actually become a business. I can actually turn its side hustle into a full-time business and I can scale it. And as the cash flow stays consistent, the cost over time slows down. And then I can use that cash flow to buy my next property and do it again.
Yep, that's the game. That's what I'm not sure we talked about it, but I wrote a book called Host Coach, and it's called A Blueprint for Achieving Financial Freedom Through Short-Term Rentals. And the idea here is that, yeah, you can get started with one and, get to sort of around that 3 or 4 level and be free.
It seems so easy, and then I even, to be honest, I seen some friends do it now, and my friends are doing really well. They're like, you cannot believe how much different it is in comparison to just normal investing. Like they had normal investing in the Bay Area, it's making good money for the market, for the area, for the price. But when you think outside of the box, and you say, for that exact dollar value and the time value I'm spending on this, it's actually 4x, 4 to 5x, and maybe even 10x, but 4 to 5x on average that, and the time is just different shift in I need to learn how to do all this stuff. I need to take the
Right.
different kind of calculated risks. But if I'm getting 4 to 5x this one, why don't I just learn how to do it and figure it out along the way?
And it's a lot more fun.
It's more
I don't know
fun.
a lot of multifamily people, investors that, spend a lot of time in their multifamily units, right? So,
Mm.
but in a short-term rental, and if you're going to pick a place where you don't mind spending a little time doing that work, but then can enjoy a hike in the afternoon. It's it's not just always about the numbers in short-term rental. It's about quality of life as well.
What do you think? So, like talking about the numbers, what do you think about like what's the average vacancy rate on these rentals?
So I teach zero vacancy. I teach price for occupancy. So you could take any short-term rental and drive that occupancy to 100% by lowering the price. You could drive it to zero by raising the price. So we use a third-party dynamic pricing tool called Price Labs that sets our price for us based on market supply and demand. And then I will go in and look at any short-term vacancies and do some discounting. So, you can always keep the place full by adjusting your price.
And you notice too, like not everyone does that. Like they're not all the other hosts are not using all the latest tech tools, systems, and readjusting. Like you think about what you're doing right there. It's kind of like an airline, right? Airlines
Exactly.
adjust seats every day, every minute based on demand, and they fill it up as they want to fill it up. But they have a set goal, they have targets, and they have pricing adjusting, and they're adjusting based on even browser, phones, history,
Yep.
and timing to see when's the best way to maximize the backend system, right?
And you hit it on the head a minute ago. Like 90% Airbnb hosts are not taking advantage of that technological advantage, right?
Mhm.
So if for the listeners out there, if you do have a short-term rental or you're thinking about one, make sure that you do investigate and learn how to use a third-party dynamic pricing tool like I use Price Labs. Um, Beyond Pricing is another. Wheelhouse is another. But they all sort of work the same way, as you said, like the airline supply and demand model. They know how many people are searching in that neighborhood for that weekend. Not even how many people have booked, but they know like what the search volume is year over year, and adjust your pricing on your behalf off of a base price that you provide, up or down, to get maximum revenue. I have, just try to clarify that a little bit for the audience. So if I have a place that has, say, a $200 a night base price, I might get $600 a night on a weekend that's a holiday in a month from now, and that's, very common. I have a place that is about a half hour away from a university, and one weekend, yeah, the 4 day stretch went, from $200 a night to like $750 a night, and it took me a while to figure out, but that was graduation weekend, and that same weekend books at that, 3-4 times rate every year around that weekend. So the pricing model will definitely eke out, numbers that you wouldn't have thought to request.
And going with that too, like if you were just using Airbnb alone and without any of these pricing tools, that means would it mean that you have to just manually adjust these and based on your experience, adjust it up and down?
Yeah, and I think most people just set it and forget it, right?
Yeah.
So set it at $200 a night, and what you find is when you do that, you're underpricing your weekends. So all your weekends will sell out real fast at $200 a night because they were underpriced. But then your weekdays will maybe be unbooked because they're overpriced. So that tool will take your weekend to, say, $350 a night, and it might take your weekday price down to 175. So that's how, back to the way we got down this road, and question was about occupancy. What is the occupancy? Um, if done right, your occupancy should be, approaching 100%, 94%. Maybe you're missing what we call orphan day, between bookings.
Yeah, and those you need orphan days too, just to maintain, clean up, get your housekeeper all ready. Depending on how fast they can turn over units, if you could turn over the same day like a hotel, that would be amazing because you're just constantly turning it and managing it within a couple hour periods.
Yeah, we turn over all of our properties, every day, right? So, but you're right. You can use that orphan day. I'll sometimes use them to go down and do a little work or fix something, or as you had suggested, have the housekeeper do a little bit of a deeper clean than the turnover clean, because you're not always scrubbing all the baseboards or cleaning out that oven, when you have a 4 hour turnover. But if you have a little extra downtime, yeah, then you can do some of those extra projects.
And thinking about that too, when you're first starting, is there any websites that educational websites that actually have like all these checklists, things to do, things to be aware of, and like how to get started going?
Not to be too self-promotional, but I've got the book on the subject. It's called Host Coach. It's available on Amazon, and it is literally from property selection to operations, all of our systems, all of our checklists, all of the tools, how to use the tools. It's not just a book report on, the features on the tools. It's not just the what, it's the how. It's exactly how we operate our business and how we teach our coaching clients to operate theirs.
Nice. That's actually really helpful too because like anything in real estate, there's no one platform that tells you everything, and no one wants to just give you everything out there. But as people progress, they build coaching systems, they build checklists, they provide services, and teach people how to really scale it. Because abundance mindset, everyone's here to help and grow, and the fact that you can learn from someone else who has already done it and done it multiple times, and you succeed faster from their failures of what they've gone through. That's really valuable. Like I do a lot of coaching, and I also um, get coached by people because for me it's an investment to accelerate my growth into any category I want to be in. Like why spend my time learning everything myself and looking and googling, youtubing everything, when I could just pay you, for example, pay someone else who has already done it to say, hey, get me to where you're at in x time period.
Yeah, it's all of our learning, and as you said, once you've coached a number of people, then you kind of become a pollinator of the best practices, right?
hmm And you learn from different coaches too on different ways they do things and like different systems, different practices, and you readjust. And every markets can be a little different, anyways, too. So speaking about markets, how do you go about for the first time you want to Airbnb? How do you go about selecting market? Besides, you mentioned okay, local within my area. Let's just say I don't have an area I want to be in, and I want to go out further. How do I select?
Well, again, that first step is, where would you like to go? Where do your friends like to go? If if you don't have an opinion on that. So I was doing a presentation down in South Carolina a few months ago. And so, I wasn't from South Carolina. I didn't have friends. I didn't know where people went. I literally did a Google search, best, weekend getaways in South Carolina. And it came up with lists of national parks, and came up with, winery areas. It came up with, lake regions, so you can, do a Google search for any state, best attractions or best weekend getaways in South Carolina, and come up with a list of, a dozen places. See what rings a bell for you, and then you can, go to Airbnb and see if it's a viable market, right? So when I say that, if you go to Airbnb, for Greenstown, and there's two Airbnbs, well, maybe that's not going to support, a robust business. Conversely, if there's 1,000, 1,500 like Miami, maybe it's a little overcrowded, right? So I'm looking for, if I type into Airbnb the name of a town or area, if there's more than 100, if there's like 300 is a good number, less than 500, then I know there's a viable, attraction to that area. It's supporting 100, 200 Airbnbs already. So I can be the best. I can go in there and put myself at the top of those search listings and get top dollar.
And that's the fun part of it too, because really what happens is you think about this, it becomes more of a marketing play and becomes
It
a
is.
marketing business, and learning how to market your portfolio, your product, your real estate better than others, and learn how to maximize it with dynamic pricing tools, better branding, better services, better reviews, better amenities, better
And that's where
location.
most people are going wrong, right?
Mhm.
So I get that question a lot, which is this too late to get started in short-term rentals? It seems like everybody's already doing it. Well, a lot of people are doing it, but a lot of people aren't doing it to the level, that, that would preclude you from being successful, right? So, 90% of hosts out there, taking, pictures with their iPhones, and their decor is whatever was left over from their house,
Mhm.
right? They're not taking the marketing perspective of using, dynamic pricing, or, all the other tools, hospitable. So there is definitely an opportunity to put yourself in the number one position by being a better operator, by being, a business, treating it like a business and not a hobby.
It's funny because when I think about real estate investing, sometimes I see, investors who look in the local markets and they say, like, I want to invest in real estate, multi units, whatever it may be. But when you see they get the place and they start investing, they don't actually want to spend the money to actually improve it to become the best and to get the highest top dollar rate. They rather say, okay, I can just spend cheap money and try to make it best as I can to get this price. But I'm like, if you spend a little bit more, it might take you a little longer, but you're going to achieve way higher results, which adds more value to your bottom line. They're like, nah, I don't want to do it. But in Airbnb, they're like, let's go for it because it makes sense.
And so
Same
when you hear these
principle.
stories, we're talking about, some of your friends that were, making these great returns. I guess the caveat to that is that the people who are making the great returns are the cream of the crop, right? So
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
have to invest in all of the decor and things that we've mentioned, and invest in your processes, and the way you treat people. So, I run across hosts that have all kinds of opinions about how to treat guests, but if you're really going to want to maximize and be, top dog, you really have to have a hospitality mindset. You have to not be concerned if somebody drops a glass, or, brought a pet maybe when they shouldn't have brought a pet. You can't take it too personally. You have to kind of think of yourself as the guy at the front desk at a Ritz-Carlton, right?
Mhm.
And that's the type of boutique customer service, that allows these people, myself included, that when you hear these stories of people who are, you know, doing these phenomenal numbers in markets where there's, three, 400 competitors, it's, you just have to be operating at a higher level.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you too. It's like you have to make a choice. Like, okay, do you want a Motel 6? You want a Hilton? You want a Ritz Carlton? What do you want? And what level of service are you willing to provide to get that number? And it becomes an investment. But yeah, the difference is by far you can tell. Okay, do I really want to sleep here or not? Not really. And that quick 7-second influence of your property and how you market it makes a difference, and that also makes a difference in the pricing because when it looks really nice, you can tell.
People are less price sensitive than you would think. A lot of people say, oh, people are getting into this, it's going to drive prices down. what I find is that it's driving demand up. And this is a good point to talk about how Airbnb works as a search algorithm. So if you pick a town and you know, do a search, Airbnb has to decide of those 300 properties what order to show them. They can't show them to you all at once. So they put them in order, kind of like a Google search, right? The showing the best first, right? So if you're not on that first page, you're not being seen. An Airbnb guest in on average looks at 4 or 5 properties, so they're not going to go to page 3 to look at those 4 or 5 properties, are they? Right? They're going to go to page 1. So you need to position yourself and measure your listing to make sure that you are in that top 10. And then when you are, then you're running into the price insensitivity because hey, it's my wife's birthday next weekend, and I'm not trying to get the $200. If the place that I really like, this place that's really gorgeous, is $700 a night, I'm going to pick that because it's a special occasion.
And that's a good point too, because one is yeah, special occasions and looking for people who are not price sensitive as much and looking for a special occasion and catering to those people at and the demand is there for people out there. And even my friend was surprised too. Like he's like, per night, okay, average 350, 400 a night, for example, some areas, but then to be able to hit $1,400 a night, like
Yeah,
wow, that's insane. He hit
crazy.
$1,400 a night
Yeah,
multiple nights. I'm like,
yeah.
really good choice. But to be honest, the house he bought looks like an Instagrammable house. Like every
Okay.
part of the house looks Instagrammable. Like wow, this is so enjoyable. I can see why people want to be here. And it,
People want something different than their own. They want a different experience.
mhm.
And what we also haven't touched on is post COVID, people want to get out of their houses. And so that's not just on the weekend, right? I get the message, all the time, which is what's your internet like? Because I got to take Zoom meetings till 2. So a lot of people who are living in this city, I'm right outside DC, maybe, young couples or professionals, young families who are working from home, staring at the same 4 walls, want to go somewhere different and have a unique experience, not just on the weekend, but during the week, Monday through Wednesday, they're going to take a 3-day jaunt. If I'm working from home, I can work from any home.
Yeah. And actually, it makes a good point because yeah, even one of my other tech friends, they did that too. Like they have the ability to go anywhere, and they're like, "Well, I don't want to be home for this time period. My kid's off school right now. Let's just go to a really nice Airbnb that
Yeah.
had a nice pool and a view." And then they just worked there the whole
Go down
couple
to
of weeks.
Tahoe or something, right?
Yeah, in a couple
No big
weeks. They're
bear.
not a couple days. They stayed there for a couple
Yeah,
weeks. Like,
yeah.
hey, I'm out of my house. I can be somewhere else.
And people aren't doing as much, international travel right now. And people have the budgets and they have the desire to go have new experiences outside of their primary residence 4 walls.
Exactly. And it's already going by so quickly too. I want to talk about I didn't yeah, it's already yeah, going fast. So, when you look at this too, and now you compare this active investing in the beginning, of course, setting it all up. How do you compare that and think about that versus like a multi-unit space where you can become more passive?
I love that debate. If you let's put the setup period out of it, um,
Mhm.
and talk about just the operations. So I know a lot of like multifamily people say, well, short-term rentals is more active. Well, multifamily is more passive because you're hiring a property manager.
Yeah.
You can hire a property manager in a short-term rental, right? There's major national companies that do it. There's a whole upswell of people who are like co-hosts, that are just individuals that are versed in how to manage other people's properties. So you can hire a property manager and be just as passive as you as a multifamily. People often elect Hosts often elect not to do that because say the typical say 20% for a property manager, it's not that much work,
Hmm.
right? It's my comment before about setting up systems. Yes, you're going to get a message and a guest's going to ask you, maybe even complain, the hot tub's dirty. So that's not passive, but that's not a lot of activity to justify 20%. So a lot of Airbnb hosts do self-manage because there's so much opportunity, so little work, and so much reward for that self-managed piece.
Yeah, and I agree with you too. I get that point too now. I see, when I look at it, and the because what I did was I waited for a year to see results from other people and what they're doing and how they're active they are, and they're saying, "Hey, to be honest, it's only like 2 hours a week now." In the beginning,
Right.
yeah, I did some setup, but after that, just 2 hours a week. But what I'm doing is throughout the 2 hours, I'm improving the processes every single time. So over
Exactly.
time, it gets easier, and now I scale from 1 to 3 to 5 to 10. Like, okay, and that goes. Those same principles apply to all now because I made it the first time. And he goes, but check this out, the numbers are so dramatical. This actually becomes someone's full-time job. You can actually retire your wife, your husband, and they can work from home doing this. But they're now, instead of doing a 40-hour work week, doing managing someone else's company, making them money. You're making money for yourself, and it's exponentially growing and scaling. And you still only spend 2 hours a week doing it.
Probably half of my coaching clients are husband and wife teams where one of them is where the goal is to get one of them out of their primary vocation.
Exactly. And they're like, that's amazing. Like, would you want to do 40 hours a week forever or 60 and go back to work at the physical office? Or you want to stay home, make the same money and have it easier and have the ability to scale? And he goes, next thing too, you don't realize how much tax benefits you can get from this when you talk to your CPA about it. But like that number is helping dramatically to their income, reducing taxes.
And why are we all in real estate? Is it for wealth creation? What's $1 million on a desert island, right? Nothing. So most people that I talk to about real estate, it's a means to financial freedom. And so, you know, do you need, $2 million a year to be financially free, or do you need, an extra $10,000 a month in cash flow?
Yeah, and speaking of cash flow, and even I re-listen to audiobooks and books, but like cash flow quadrant, like really taking perspective of where are you at in your life? Are you employee? You're self-employed? You're a business? Are you investor? You want to become an investor? It takes a certain skill set and certain learning which we didn't learn in school. But the fact is, if we can learn to become investors, create that financial, find your why, as we talked about, finding your why and creating financial freedom and generational wealth. I think that's way more fun and challenging, but it's a great opportunity to really build. And there's a percentage of people in life who will actually take that opportunity because risk is the hardest thing for some people to take, right?
Right.
And that's challenging because how do you help people who want it, but they won't take the risk to do it, right? They want it, but they're in the middle line right now. They're trying to cross over still. So you're, as a coach, we try to help them break through that part of it to actually go into the investment side of things.
I make this analogy, when we're talking about short-term rentals. I think most people have heard enough stories, to know that it's kind of an exciting um, endeavor, right? It's profitable, it's exciting, it's fun. So I picture this beach, off in the distance, and this is the beautiful success of short-term rentals. But between here and the beach is a forest. It has all these trees in it, right? There's no lions, there's no tigers, there's no bears, but there's a bunch of trees that you can run into. And setting up a short-term rental is like that. There's a lot of little nuance to navigate. And that's why we wrote the book, to say, okay, here's the path. Here's the clear path to the shiny beach.
Nice. And that's a really good concept and point because when you think about it, like, oh yeah, there is always another side to things, and you just gotta fight your way to get through that forest. And once you get there, it becomes crystal clear. But in order to do it, it takes a lot of work to go through it, right? Like all these up and downs, trails, and things that block you. But once you can break through those, and you have people like you and me who are coaching people through that, it makes it so much easier to say, okay, I have someone's hand I can hold to guide me to get to the right path. Like if you want to climb Mount Everest, you're not going alone. You got guides to get you to the top and
Right.
who have done it multiple times over and over again.
That's a great analogy, and there's just a lot of little decisions along the way in a short-term rental. Um, but there's right answers, and it's none of them are really all that scary.
Another point too is like, okay, this is stressful. It's so much work. I don't want to do it. I'm like, which is more stressful, doing that one time, learning throughout and growing yourself to learn how to do it, or working 40 hours for the rest of your life and retiring with nothing after Social
Right.
Security and pension and nothing?
I think a lot of people are starting to figure that out.
I'm glad. I really want people to figure that out because it took me a while, even though I started investing when I was 24, but it took me a while to get there. Even at 24, I was like, this got to be a better way. You can't just be working in tech forever and just sitting here and waiting for people to lay you off as you get older and learning the systems and everything changing over and over again. There got to be
I
a
think
better
there's
way.
some silver linings to the whole, global pandemic.
Yeah.
One, a lot of us, saw that we can work from home. A lot of us reevaluated our work money priorities. And so I think that, we will, the silver lining is that, you know, it's shaken up the world enough that people are looking at it, in a different way and reevaluating, their priorities and, importance of family time and financial freedom.
Actually, I like that part of it, not the COVID part, but I like the part where the last 2 years everything changed and it's so much better. Because for me, I actually been working home for over 15 years,
Okay.
and people didn't realize that. I'm like, there's a better way. Like, you don't have to drive to work, you don't have to drive back home, you don't have to deal with traffic, accidents, car maintenance, everything else. You get time back, but you use that time for side hustles, build your real estate empire. You have way more fun, and you create that financial freedom, and you spend time learning how to do new things and investing into your life for your kids, especially for family. Then you're going to work so much harder to do that because you get time back. That financial time back is worth more than anything, And people nowadays are starting to realize that, hey, I thought I needed to go work. I thought I needed to be next to everyone. I thought I needed to do this. I'm like, you could, but what are you gaining from that after the end of the day?
Right. I couldn't agree more.
Exactly. So that's a part of it too. So some other things I wanted to ask you about
Yeah.
too is that what other tips besides the ones we already talked about, like getting people to start investing, people who are already doing Airbnb, how to be successful in 2022 and beyond?
So tips or tricks for
Mhm.
success.
Yep.
Well, I think we've talked about a lot of it.
Mhm.
One of the pieces that we haven't touched on is sort of the continual improvement. Um, so, as you have a portfolio, you want to be reinvesting in that portfolio, not just growing it, right? So, improving those properties and then monitoring, measuring your progress. So, what gets measured gets managed. So,
Mhm.
we use a tool called Rank Breeze that helps us keep track of exactly where our listings are showing in search results. And so, we can use that um, to make adjustments to our pricing and policies to rise our listings in search results. And if they're significantly always number one, then we know that we have some authority that we can raise prices. So that's kind of a pro tip.
What's the application called again?
Rank Breeze.
Rank Freeze.
It's a software as a service website.
Rank Freeze. Cool. That's really cool. So yeah, you're using all these tech tools that really get out there. I think a lot of people miss out on opportunities in real estate because they're not using all the latest tech gadgets and things that actually help you analyze better. So the point of it is not the system, is the analyzation of data to help you figure out where you're at in the marketplace to really figure out how to rank better.
Yeah, these platforms have done a great job, opening up their APIs to third parties to allow all kinds of solutions to be built in an ecosystem around the booking platform.
Yeah. And I think another question people will ask you too is, in the last 2 years, how did the COVID really impact the Airbnb business, the properties you manage? Because a lot of people during that time period stayed home or didn't want to travel yet because they didn't feel comfortable.
It went from the business being good to sort of really throwing gas on the fire, to the business being, extremely good. So we did have a little bit of a 60-day downturn, right, as things were getting going. Um, but then, that was kind of in, I guess 2 years ago, this time frame 2 years ago, we
Mhm.
kind of stalled. Well, when things were just really hitting, like in New York, for example, really hard. If we remember back to that time frame, and people were just very fearful. But as soon as it got to the summer of, I guess it was 2020, then people were ready to, get out of their houses. We'd been quarantined, and I think that's when that shift really started to happen in people's minds. People, we're travelers. Humans, we want to travel by nature, and so I think that little bit of fear and shakeup from that initial, COVID response really cemented within people their desire to go experience something outside of their own neighborhood. And the timing probably, for Airbnb, I couldn't imagine having to be Brian Chesky during, when the pandemic was starting, and he was probably thinking that nobody'd ever use the platform ever again, and that they were going to die. But it turned out to probably be a blessing, for these platforms, because it shook up the world and helped us reevaluate our priorities, and so now it's extremely strong.
I agree. I think during the last 2 years actually became a lot better for real estate in general because, yeah, people by nature want to get out of their houses, want to be somewhere else. And the good thing too is you mentioned like localized areas where you can go to, like you're not traveling out of state, out of areas where you need to fly, far distances to get there. And the point being that if a lot of people want to utilize local spaces nearby and have a nice place to enjoy, that it actually accelerated that part of it because now instead of a hotel is like, okay, I'm going to be surrounded by people in elevators,
Right.
next rooms, and using the same HVAC. No, I get a home by myself with no one next to me. I'm fine with that. And I'll pay for that.
Yeah, I don't think the genie's going back in the bottle on that one, you know?
Yeah,
I think that's, and then we look at this summer, my wife was just planning a trip to Las Vegas with some girlfriends, and like flight prices have gone through the roof, with fuel prices. So I think even, just looking at a really narrow term, right? Like I think this summer is going to be extremely robust just because people aren't taking the flights that they once would have for family vacations.
exactly. And yeah, I agree too. And with the flight prices so high, somewhere people telling me I can just fly to Hawaii a little cheaper than flying some local places. I'm like, yeah, you might as well just fly to Hawaii then for that price, right? So it makes sense. I mean, they're flying to Arizona, so like it's cheaper to fly to Hawaii from SF than it was to fly to Arizona because of gas. I'm like, okay, kind of cool. What are the four main pillars of short-term rentals, and like how do you use that to create financial freedom?
I think we've touched on them through the conversation here. The first is find your where, right? Find a place that you're excited about, that you don't mind going to, um, and that's the first step. Second step is we say make it pop, and that's your decor. Make it clean, make it inviting. We like to say our cabins are rustic on the outside and crate and barrel on the inside. And part of making it pop is making the stand out in the listing with professional photography is an absolute must, right? You have to have professional real estate photos because people aren't seeing the property. They're making this $1,000 a night investment, as you mentioned, based solely on your photography. So that's number two. Number three is price per occupancy. So adjusting your price to keep you 95% full, and that's going to feed the algorithm to put you back towards the top. And the fourth is to monitor that rank for um, monitoring your ranking placement so that you can leverage being at the top to higher prices.
That's actually really good points to make, and that's if you people take this and utilize this kind of roadmap and guide, and even looking at your book, The Host Coach, that actually is really helpful because now they have a blueprint on how to really build this out, how to take advantage of learning from you and your successes for your group, and utilizing that to really scale. And it makes you feel comfortable knowing, okay, if I just do these things, I know 90% of people aren't doing it. I can become more sustainable. I don't really have. I take a little less risk, understanding more and go into it. But once you get the first property, then you start getting comfortable to start thinking about it as a true business that you can scale and just improving throughout and utilizing this technology to optimize the performance of each property.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay, so we're about to wrap up now. Any final words, and how do people really reach out to you? How do they learn more about what you're doing, how you can help them,
Yeah.
more about your book, and how they can move forward in investing into short-term rentals?
Yeah, the website is hostcoach.co, and there's information about coaching on there. There's a blog that we've started that start to answer some of these questions. There's a link. The book is available on Amazon, at Host Coach, and then our Instagram is kind of fun because we do a lot of behind the scenes on our renovations and fun stuff like that, and that's just at host_coach on Instagram.
Speaking of Instagram, final wrap up, using social media as a platform to really help drive awareness to all your Airbnbs, and by providing really good pictures, videos, storytelling, that creates awareness for your property too. And using social media can actually be really additional benefit because it puts you out there and people say, hey, I want to be here. Oh, that's so nice. I actually can use that for my Instagram. I can use this for pictures, and I want to be in that location anyways. That can create another additional layer of scalability.
Absolutely. Like you said, your friend who had the Instagrammable home, you
Yeah.
know, um, you know, for listeners in the audience that are, versed in social media, you can really, grow traffic to your properties through your own photos. We had done something one time where we had, I think we had a little sign made on Etsy, it had a hashtag. I think it was like hashtag cabin life, which is cabinlife.com is our website for the properties. And we
Nice.
put up this sign, in a spot in the house that made a great, had a great view and a great picture. And so we always encourage people. I think we even did something in our messaging for a while that said, tag us in a picture, and I don't know, we did a drawing or something like that. But you can get real creative. That's another just sort of jumping off point about short-term rentals, is that whatever your strength is, whatever your creativity is, it really this business really lends itself to personalization, right? So, let's say you're huge on TikTok, right? Let's say you're, into, whatever it is that you're into as a personal passion or personal strength can be leveraged usually into a successful short-term rental business.
I love it. It makes me want to get into some short-term rentals right now, and like seeing these results pay a lot. And comparing to the multi-unit space is just different in what you choose to do. But in reality, I see it as a really great way to really build your cash flow, financial wealth, and a great investment opportunity for anyone. So for everyone out there, be sure to check out our podcast, The Truth About Real Estate, and be sure to check out Colin and Tate at Host Coach. Learn more about his book, his coaching, and how they're growing, and take a look at that. And really re-listen to this podcast. And there's a lot of takeaways from this, but the best thing to do is actually to take action and get started, and work with people that are doing this and learn from all of them out there, free or not. It's the best way to grow if you really want to build that financial freedom and financial generational wealth. You got to take action and do it.
I love it.
Cool. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks, Matt. Take care.